Thank you for joining us for another workshop sponsored by the University of Kentucky's Office of Work Life. This workshop is a part of our Work Life series that we do monthly here at the university to enrich the lives of our employees and to assist them on their journey to manage their work and life responsibilities. Today, we're going to be talking about using mindfulness to enhance your self-care, and we are thrilled to have Dr. Nathan Wood with us today to kind of walk us through this topic. And he'll also share with you guys a little bit about the services that he offers here at the university. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for everybody for coming. I know this is a topic that is definitely in vogue, for lack of a better way of saying it. So there's a lot of talk about mindfulness lately. So I'm grateful, thanks to Azetta and her team and UK Work Life for the chance to be a part of these presentations and share with you all a bit more about mindfulness and a little bit more about who I am and what I do. So let me actually click on the right button. So just a really brief background so you know a little bit more about who's talking to you all today. I was born and raised in southern Idaho. So if you look about where the A is roughly the area I grew up in. I grew up in a small town. I know small town is relative. There's rural and then there's rural. I grew up in a small town, about 3,000 people, literally more cows than people. My dad owned one of the two grocery stores in the town. So luckily I did not grow up milking cows like a lot of my friends did. But it was a just idyllic place to grow up. A little bit more on the personal side. This is an older picture, myself in the middle, pre-fuzz, and my wife is to my photos right, and my son is in the Letterman jacket, and then my daughters are on the end. We've since this picture, there's two grandbabies and one on the way. So yeah, so I restrain myself. I don't have any grandchildren pictures that would take up our entire presentation. A little bit more about me in terms of things I enjoy doing. I like to make stuff. This is my slight armada that I've made and where I like to go. So that's the Elkhorn Creek here in Scott County. So speaking of mindfulness and wanting to recenter, outdoors is a great place to do it. So on the professional side, I did my bachelor's degree in psychology at Utah State University, a minor in sociology, and a minor in Tagalog, which is Filipino. I don't speak Tagalog. It's been a hot minute. I don't remember much anymore. Not a language that's used a lot here in the States. So Utah State for my bachelor's, my master's and PhD in marriage and family therapy from Brigham Young University. And through that process, I am also a clinical fellow of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy and an AMFT approved supervisor as well. And I've been at UK since 2008. I'm now an associate professor in the Department of Family Sciences, and I am the director of the I-RAFT clinic. Some of you that have been on campus for a while may have seen the name UK Family Center. That is us. After about 30 years, and we got tired a little bit of getting phone calls for the medical family clinic. We thought we would rebrand with a name that's more reflective of our services that we offer here. So the I-RAFT clinic, so individual, relational, and financial therapy. All of our services are available to UK employees and their families. We have a sliding scale fee. All UK employees or their dependents that live in their household. The session rate is $25 a session maximum. If your income and household size, the sliding scale puts you lower, you pay the lower rate for those fees for per session fee. And we do not have a limit on the number of sessions that we offer. Right now, we do have about a 4 to 6 week wait list right now. Our clinic is the home of the couple and family therapy program here at UK. So all of our therapists are intern therapists in their master's degree, and they have to do 300 hours of therapy, delivering therapy services as the therapist before we let them graduate. And they're under licensed supervisors such as myself and some of our team. So that's a little bit about me, my background, and kind of my role here at the university. I have a split administration role to administer the clinic as well as teaching and some research as well. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of Kentucky as well. So in order to structure a presentation a little bit, we're going to borrow from Kipling, one of his poems, and we're going to structure our presentation about mindfulness this way. I keep 6 honest serving people. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and when, why and when and how and where and who. So we're kind of, when it comes to mindfulness, we're going to go through this kind of structure. What is mindfulness? Why is mindfulness? When, how, where, who, all that good stuff. So we're going to start with a what. Now, originally, mindfulness originates from Buddhism. And as we'll see here in a few minutes, what we read about so much in mindfulness and pop psychology in the States has kind of divorced itself from the origins of the concept of mindfulness. If we look at mindfulness from the original tradition, and it's really important, I believe, that we look at it from the original tradition. We don't have to be Buddhist, obviously, to use mindfulness effectively. There's some richness in the original conceptualization of mindfulness, however, that is really, really, really important. And we need to pay attention to. So I don't want to get too many spoilers for later on. So in the original conceptualization of Buddhism, mindfulness is, what is it? It's a non-judgmental acceptance and awareness of the present moment. And it's not just awareness of what's happening around me in the present moment. It's this non-judgmental acceptance and awareness, also what's happening internally and externally to me. And there's, in the original conceptualization of mindfulness from the Buddhist tradition, there is no ranking of emotions. Like happiness, as a positive emotion, or sadness or depression or anxiety or stress as a negative emotion. There's no value judgment on internal experiences. So I'm using the term internal experiences to describe thoughts, cognitions, as well as emotions. And even below emotions, the physiological responses that we might have. So the non-judgmental acceptance across the board and being present with those internal and external experiences from moment to moment is really what mindfulness at its core is about. It is not just meditation or breathing exercises. Again, I think that's a common misnomer and what's the word, like a conflation of those ideas of mindfulness is meditation and meditation is mindfulness. Meditation has a role in mindfulness that we'll talk about. It is not the only way, nor should it be the only way that we engage in mindfulness in our day-to-day lives. And to come back around a little bit to this idea of mindfulness, kind of like our westernized version of mindfulness, especially, it's potentially problematic when we start to eliminate some of the big ideas that are actually really helpful, and kind of pick and choose what we want. Western society has a really long history of like commercializing ideas from other cultures and faith traditions, and mindfulness is no exception. And so it can be problematic, but there's a couple Western therapy traditions. So acceptance and commitment therapy, which we will talk about a lot, called ACT, is how it's referred to, uses more the Buddhist tradition around mindfulness in its therapeutic approach. So much of what I'm talking about today in terms of mindfulness and mental health and well-being is heavily informed from ACT. And so we'll get into that a little bit more, and kind of we'll also get into a little bit of why potentially why a westernized version of mindfulness is not as powerful as it could be. Okay, so we have our what, the non-judgmental acceptance and being present in the moment is our what, but why? Why is mindfulness so helpful? Why is it so powerful? And so my goal today in this talk around mindfulness is to help you all become better at feeling and not to feel better. This is the biggest challenge I think Western society has when we bring mindfulness, the OG mindfulness, into our culture, where we're thinking about using mindfulness as a way to feel better. And that's not mindfulness. Mindfulness at its core, from its original roots, is to be better at feeling, not to feel better. And this is something that I actually share a lot with my students as well. As therapists, as clinicians, feeling better isn't necessarily, it's great if that's the outcome, but if we can help people be better at feeling, that's more of the teaching a person how to fish rather than giving them a fish. That's going to be a skill set that can transform a lifetime if we can become better at feeling. So that's kind of the main why mindfulness is, to become better at feeling. So to build on this a little bit more, mental health does not equal happiness. So let me back up a little bit. So many times over the course of my career, I've been doing therapy. I was in a similar program to the one I'm teaching in. We had to do 500 therapy hours. So I started working with clients, January of 1999. So it's been a hot minute. And over the years, as I was working with clients, they would say, well, I need help. I just want to be happy. And I'm like, okay. And the implication oftentimes they're saying is, I want to be happy all the time. And what I would tell them is like, I don't know how to help you. I don't know how to help you be happy. there's times in our lives where sadness is the appropriate response, grief, a little bit of stress, actually a moderate amount of stress actually increases performance. So stress isn't always the enemy that we always think it is. Prolonged stress, everyday stress, like, that's literally toxic to our bodies, but a little bit of stress at times is actually helpful. So and they would kind of stare at me like, well, why, Nate? Like, I want to be happy. Like, what you telling me you're not going to help me be happy? And I'm like, no, I'm exactly what I'm telling you. I'm not going to help you be happy because of those things. We have emotions are rich experience of life. And to help someone only have some emotions, but not the other meaningful emotions, is one, ethically, I don't think is a good idea. But two, and more realistically, is I can't. If we think about it, we can no more control our emotions or even our thoughts. What comes into our awareness just happens. What the emotions we experience, it's like the weather. I can no more control my emotions than I can control the weather outside. That doesn't mean I can't do something with them. It doesn't mean once I have a thought, I can't do something with that thought, or I have an emotional experience internally. That doesn't automatically mean what I express or what others might see is like an automatic switch. So please, I am making a really kind of clear distinction here of terms of what happens just naturally within us is not controllable in the way I think a lot of people want it to be. So mental health is not happiness. Mental health is not the absence of discomfort, nor is mental health even oftentimes the frequency of distressing thoughts or feelings. There's strong evidence that actually suggests that the number of quote unquote negative thoughts somebody has really isn't all that different from someone in a depressed state versus someone in a non-depressed state. The difference is their relationship to those thoughts. That in one sense, it's problematic, like I'm fused with it, like that thought, that feeling is the capital T truth, absolute truth. That's the way it's been, that's the way it's always going to be, that's the way it's always going to be. Versus like, oh, there's that thought again, and just it comes and it goes on its own. So it's our relationship to our emotions and cognitions and our relationship to our environment that really speak to what mental health looks like. Yeah, and Jamie, we will come back to your comment there about the role of emotions. So what is mental health then? From an ACT perspective, so I need to be very clear about this again, I want to reiterate this. When I'm talking about mental health, what is mental health? Is it, it's not happiness, it's not that. I am coming from a pretty distinct empirically informed model of acceptance and commitment therapy, so ACT. So I do need to make that clear. So what is mental health from this perspective? It's being psychologically flexible and being present in the moment while pursuing meaningful directions in your life. So there's some really critical points, and I need to look at my time and figure out, okay, how much more of this do we want to unpack? Really quickly, psychological flexibility is that it's having a different relationship with the internal experiences that we have. So an internal experience is our physiological response, our affective, emotional response, our feelings, and the thoughts. Those are those internal experiences. So psychological flexibility is like, wow, okay, so I'm having all these experiences, but they don't get to define who I am or what I'm going to do about or with that information. So that's psychological flexibility. That gives us the ability to be present in that given moment, not stuck in our heads. When we get stuck in our heads, it's like there's this mirror. And so all we see when we look at the world is ourselves and our own internal experiences, and we're unable to fully connect with the person in front of us because we're only engaging what's happening internally for us. While pursuing meaningful directions. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So again, one more kind of a combination of what and why. If we're coming from an ACT tradition or original Buddhist tradition of mindfulness, if your goal is to use mindfulness to avoid, get rid of, minimize, fix, or soothe uncomfortable or unpleasant thoughts and feelings, it will not work, at least in the long run. And a lot of our westernized mindfulness tout mindfulness as a way to soothe. And it can have that impact. It can have a soothing impact. If we're using mindfulness only to soothe, it or to avoid or minimize, like get rid of these uncomfortable experiences and uncomfortable feelings or uncomfortable thoughts, they keep coming back. It's and then the people get distressed, like, well, I'm doing all this mindfulness, I still have those thoughts keep coming back, and it's just not working. Or I keep having these feelings, and they're just awful, and I don't like them, and why can't I just get rid of them? And then they throw away mindfulness as a practice or as a lifestyle almost, or a way of being would be another way to say it. They throw it out because it didn't get rid of whatever feeling or thought they wanted to get rid of. That's not what mindfulness is. In the core tradition, mindfulness is the non-judgmental acceptance and awareness of that present moment. And if there's a paradox in the mindful traditions, meaning the more present I am with these feelings, the minimizing or soothing, like it changes our relationship to our experiences that we have, our internal experiences that we have. It has the side effect of the things we want to have happen. But if you go into mindfulness with these kind of goals in mind, it likely will not work in the long run. And in fact, Stephen Hayes, who's the developer of ACTS, suggests that avoidance, and research would support this, avoidance of uncomfortable feelings actually can make it worse. So a brief example is, don't think of a white polar bear. So as soon as everybody's like, oh, there it is, it's like, okay, well, I want to go to therapy because I have a polar bear problem. It's I have a PBD, I have a polar bear disorder. So I'm going to go to therapy to help me understand, get rid of this polar bear problem. And so they go to therapy and they're like, oh, let's look at your childhood. You know what? My parents totally were like Coca-Cola fans. So every stinking Christmas, all I saw was like polar bears and commercials and like polar bears in Coke bottles and like, ugh. And so the therapist keeps asking questions and exploring about the polar bear problem and the polar bear disorder. And my goal is like, okay, I'm not going to think about white polar bear. That's what and then we actually, in the struggle to get rid of it, actually entrenches it potentially a little bit more. And so someone struggling with, say, agoraphobia or fear of being in an enclosed space with a lot of people and the word escape, they don't feel like they can get out. So it's hugely distressing for someone that struggles with that kind of anxiety. it's hugely distressing for them to go to the mall, come to a class, go out in public. And so to avoid feeling that uncomfortableness, they stay inside because they don't have to feel that discomfort. And yet, and then they start missing life because they want to avoid these uncomfortable feelings. Mindfulness invites us to lean into and that non-judgmental acceptance of emotion, period, no value judgment, and change that relationship we have to our emotions so we can go do those things and that are meaningful and important to us, like school, or I want to go, I saw this really cute outfit, I want to go to the mall. I know I'm dating myself, like I want to go to Amazon, but I want to go out in public, I want to go to the grocery store, I actually want to choose my own produce rather than choosing someone else choosing my produce for me. Those are important goals, and changing our relation. Mindfulness helps us shift our relationship to our own experiences. So this is coming back to Jamie's comment in the chat. And this is paraphrasing Steve Hayes here a little bit, but those who have suffered, meaning struggled with uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, those who have suffered are especially advantaged because they know what it means to be human. I just love this quote. I think it's so powerful because it starts to think about emotions differently, and especially those more challenging emotions and thoughts we have. So mindfulness invites us to think about thoughts and feelings as internal experiences that we all have. Just like I have a mouse, I have a phone, I have thoughts, I have feelings. These are not who I am. They're not identity kind of statements. These thoughts and feelings are something we have, and potentially gives us insight, because as Hayes says, we're especially advantaged because we know what it means to be human and be in this journey of life. So we're going to do a quick little exercise. You don't need to hop on the chat or anything like that. But let's talk about scribbles and noises. And you're going to see some stuff on the screen. And I want you to think about, okay, what am I seeing? Try to figure it out. Some of you may figure it out sooner than others, depending on how multilingual you are. I know that one also is Filipino. All right, so some of you may already know what these scribbles mean. There's going to be some more scribbles. That's also a scribble. Pero is a scribble. Hund is a scribble. Like the letters that we're looking at, the H-U-N-D, those are the noises we make to identify the scribbles on the page. All right, so if you haven't already guessed, here's a visual of what each of these symbols, each of these scribbles mean. In the English language, we use that scribble, and we call that scribble D-O-G, and it says dog. This is Max, by the way, and some other scribbles and noises around this might be that. He's spoiled rotten. But he was looking good for the Derby, but he is absolutely spoiled rotten. Language, how we communicate, if we stop and think about it, this is just noise. And written language are scribbles, and we our internal experiences are informed by our external training that we receive in terms of what sounds mean what words, what scribbles mean what words, what do they represent. Language is inherently symbolic, and our thoughts oftentimes come in the form of language. And so that's an experience that we have. It's a way we try to maybe describe, but it's not inherent. Um, so if I'm in the Philippines, also, if I say dog in the Philippines, they speak pretty good English. Actually, some of their schools in English, they would know exactly what I'm talking about. But if I go into the hills and very rural areas of the Philippines, I could say dog, and they would look at me cross-eyed, and I would say also, and they're like, oh yeah, and they would know exactly what I'm talking about. So this idea of languages and thoughts, which usually come in the form of language, is symbols. They're scribbles and noises. They're not defining. So frequently, I say this, I am Nate, is an example I give. So I'm going to introduce you to show you two other pictures here. There's this little guy flying a kite. And there's that guy, same person. So another example of a mindfulness kind of exercise you could do, and to kind of drive home this point that we are not our thoughts and feelings, they are things that we have, is I can go back into my own mind and my own memory and experience this memory of running down the sidewalk in the late 70s, mid 70s, as if there's an awareness of who my identity is in that memory, because I can go back and re-look at it and see it, re-experience it through my own eyes, just as like I'm looking at the screen today. So that there's a continuity of awareness that is ourself. That's separate from language, separate from emotion. It's just, I'm innate. Like I don't need a lot of other descriptive words. And so sometimes one little language thing we can do in terms of getting into the how is switching our language a little bit. Say, hi, nice to meet you, I am Nate. That's an identity, that's a language, that's an identity statement. I'm telling you who my name. We use identity language in lots of other ways that are not so helpful sometimes. Hi, I'm depressed. I am depressed. Like, I am the thing. So mindfulness would suggest that, wait, no, I am not the thing. I'm experiencing depression. I have thoughts that are consistent with depression, or I have thoughts consistent with anxiety. Those are things I'm experiencing, and they're very real and they're very visceral. And yet I am the one experiencing them. They are not me. I'm separate from them. So when mindfulness, yes. We can be mindful all the time. Like right now, I'm aware of my palms are a little bit sweaty. I'm looking at we're at 37 minutes and I'm not anywhere near through all my slides. So I'm aware there's a little bit of stress I'm experiencing right now. And it's informing me, okay, I need to maybe do something different. It's giving me information. Meditation can be a great place to start on mindfulness. If you've not practiced mindfulness at all, meditation is a great place. In your handout, we don't have time. There's a great video on how to do mindfulness. We won't watch. But a key thing about mindfulness is leaning into the discomfort. So we talked about the I-RAFT. thinking about these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings as like, oh, it's my, why does this crazy uncle always show up to family gatherings? We don't invite him, but he finds out anyway. Or my crazy aunt, like mindfulness invites us and doing through like a meditative practice, going and talking to them and actually getting to know that uncle and aunt, get to know their backstory, um, meet them as humans, and doing that same idea with our internal experiences. Like, wow, I'm getting really anxious right now, and actually sitting down mentally with that feeling and say, oh, okay, so you've been around for a long time. Like, what's up? Help me understand. And they may actually start to tell you their origin story, that feeling. It's like, oh, this has been around my whole life. Rather than running from it, get to know it. And you may learn more about yourself and why it's there. And so it puts it in its proper place. It doesn't mean the feeling goes away. I guess maybe in a way to wrap up, we'll go through this really quick. Where, yes, you can be mindful at anywhere. Who, also pretty easy. Yes, but you, anyone, and we can all be mindful. And there's some couples that contextualscience.org is the home page of I-RAFT. A really great self-help book that you can get on Amazon. I highly, highly, highly recommend is Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life by Steve Hayes. Happiness Trap also is along these same lines from this lens that if we spend our lives trying to avoid uncomfortable emotions, we are going to miss the most important parts of our life. The mindfulness exercise that you could also do is imagine you are the bus driver and the feelings and thoughts that you're experiencing get to get on the bus and get off the bus when they need to. And we get to make decisions about what's important. So if I'm feeling very angry because of something, lots of things, lots of reasons why the anger might be there. But I also have a value system that says I'm not going to yell at my child because I'm angry. I can experience angry and I can understand why I'm angry. And I could have maybe some anger on my face and still speak to my child in a loving way, because the value, what's important gets to dictate my behavior, not my feelings. The feelings and the thoughts, they're not driving the bus. I get to drive the bus. I just have to see them for what they are as passengers. That the fact that there's anger there, that crazy uncle also has actually pretty scared underneath of it, maybe a little bit of sadness there too. And worry might be even there for the well-being of my child. I can experience that, I can be aware of that and still make a meaningful choice in how I respond to my child. And anger is still there, but it doesn't get to drive my response. So, oh, good to know. All right, so I'm going to stop the sharing the PowerPoint. You'll all get a copy of this, I believe. My contact information, please reach out to me. The UK Family Center is our website, and you can also email me at I-RAFT Clinic. So I-RAFT Clinic at uky.edu.